Professor James J. Barrell has been a professor and research psychologist at the University of West Georgia and University of Florida. He obtained his PhD in experimental psychology at the University of California at Davis. In addition to his teaching, he performed research with the Medical College of Virginia, National Institutes of Health, and Stanford Research Institute International. Throughout his career, Dr. Barrell has published journal articles and books, as well as presented them at numerous professional conferences and meetings. An underlying theme throughout his career has been an interest in the mind-body connection, performance enhancement, as well as the development of a new science, a science of human experience. He is currently a consultant for application of experiential methods to psychology and neuroscience. He is also a personal and interpersonal consciousness growth facilitator. Professor Barrell, in his book, co-authored with Dr. Donald Price, titled Inner Experience and Neuroscience, published by MIT Press in 2012, adopts a very interesting approach to integrating inner experience with scientific methodology. They put forth the idea that it is best to capture the phenomena as narrated by the co-investigators themselves, as first-person experience or the inner phenomena, rather than doing it on a certain selected subject meditationist, whether he's a Buddhist monk or Franciscan nun or whatever, and wiring the head of the person and then getting the neural signature through EEG or other scans, which is in fact a third-person evidence. The first-person phenomenology, first-person inner experience as a reality when subjected to third-person investigation, as is accepted in science, becomes the best way to wed the Eastern philosophy with the neuroscience or cognitive science of the mind. All of us are eagerly waiting to hear Professor Barrell's inaugural talk entitled Inner Experience and Neuroscience Merging Both Perspectives. Professor Barrell, please.
The aim of this talk to present a science of the human experience. And by experience, a lot of times I think we're sort of confused about, are we talking about consciousness? Are we talking about mind, mental activity? And when I mean by experience, the thing that's happening right now with all of us right here together. We're all experiencing. There's no way that I can step out of experience. We can't step out of our experience. It's always here. So it doesn't matter if you're theorizing or you are trying to understand a direct experience, whether you're meditating, you're always involved in experience. As Merleau-Ponty says, you either have to take it as everything or nothing. And unfortunately, a lot of Western science has been sort of looking at it as nothing. So here I'm trying to present a view that would merge the viewpoints of the inside and the outside, or east and west, in this methodology. The stages of this particular experiential method, there are 6, and the first stage is awareness. And that, again, that term has been used a lot, thrown around a lot, but awareness means that the ability to be able to notice whatever is happening in your experience, and whatever is happening right now in your experience or in my experience. Noticing your thoughts, your feelings, your perceptions, whatever is going on. Secondly, again, the observing and noticing as part of awareness. This is the first stage of an ability to have an experiential method. Without this, nothing's going to happen. So in other words, until we are able to become aware of our own experiences, we're going to be thinking about our experiences. You understand, thinking about experiences means we'll be theorizing about experiences. Not saying anything problem with that. Nothing's wrong with that. But I'm just saying if you want direct data, you've got to give it up and see even how you think and take into account your own biases, whatever research you're doing. So it's that ability to be aware and to step back far enough to notice our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, the environment, our relationships, all that. And that ability to step back, of course, there's many different forms of meditation, mindful meditation, relaxation techniques, whatever it takes to at first sort of slow down and be able to notice what's going on. The third stage, describing and reporting, once you've noticed the data, once you see what's going on, the next issue to have a science of the experience is to be able to know how to describe it. And this is the crucial phase, because we're not talking about interpreting the data, but trying to get life on paper. Exactly what's going on right now. Are you feeling bored? Are you excited? Whatever's happening. And if you can note exactly how you feel, I'm getting tired, or I'm hungry right now. You see? In other words, no interpretation, no poetical response here, just a direct presentation, first person, present tense of the data. First person, present tense of the data. So what this means essentially is when you're noticing this, it may not be right in the moment, this moment. It may be an immediate retrospective or reliving of an experience that just happened. It just happened. But again, it's this stage of observation or awareness. Next, how to report that experience. Once you have the written reports and data, the next question becomes, how do I understand this stuff? How do I put it all together? And now we reach the stage of common elements and ask questions about, if I want to study a form of meditation, for example, I'd like to find out what are the common factors in this particular form of meditation. It doesn't matter what situation I'm in. It makes no difference. The situations can vary, but what are the essential factors every time I have this experience that's going to happen? When I'm anxious, every time I'm anxious, this particular aspect of my experience is going to be happening. And you find the common elements across different situations. Once you do that, you can understand that experience. And that experience could be anything. It could be the experience of freedom, of will, of motivation, of emotion. Could be anything. So the idea is to observe, report, understand. It's like 1, 2, 3. Once you get to the common factors, the next question is, can we agree on these common factors? If we become co-investigators together, and can we, as co-investigators, agree on what these common factors are? Now, some of these we'll say are idiosyncratic. Oh, they're different for you than for me, but there's certain overlap. And if we can find the overlap among the intersubjective investigators, we can start to find those common factors. So we're reaching a group consensus. If you get a group consensus among co-investigators, you can come up with common factors that can become testable. And at that point, you can also start to merge the qualitative with the quantitative. When you come up with these common factors, you can say, hey, can we measure this stuff? Can you actually measure these things in experience, such as desire, expectations? Can you measure that? Say, yeah, of course you can. Okay? So we reached this sixth point of merging quantitative and qualitative by starting with a qualitative investigation of our experience, then asking the question, can we now begin to measure that? And many of you are familiar with psychophysical techniques. This is like measuring in like magnitude estimations and so forth, as you can measure, for example, how much do you want something or how much do you expect something. And so these particular aspects of a phenomenon are all measurable. So we're talking about the brain imaging, using psychophysical methods and other scientific methods, whatever. What I'm trying to do here is to show you that the experiential orientation of the East and the meditative techniques and so forth, and the use of awareness can be merged with the methodologies of the West. They can be merged, East, West. Now, going into this a little bit more carefully, we're looking at awareness. And what is awareness? And awareness is being present to the experience. It's being right with this moment, right now. Right now. And noticing whatever is happening right now. That observing and that noticing is what's going to provide the data for the science of a human experience. But we have to, in some sense, sort of get out of our head and even notice our head. And notice the thoughts, the feelings, sensations. You become like a witness of whatever's going on. And then you get some very interesting information that can become the basis of a science of the human experience. Here's some water lilies. And just as an example of trying to clarify what awareness is, to understand that. It's not the same as paying attention. So looking at these water lilies, you can begin to see that if you just looked at a water lily, as paying attention to it, you could pay attention to that water lily, and the arrow's showing it going in one direction, like I can pay attention to you right now, or you could pay attention to me. There's kind of a distance there, right? When you pay attention to something, you kind of feel like there's sort of a distance between where you're at and what you're paying attention to. There's you attending to the target. Okay? Now we got absorption. Another aspect and state of experiencing is when you become absorbed in something. You look at this flower, and all of a sudden you can become so immersed in it, you can lose yourself in it. You can become totally absorbed in that. You could say one with it, but you could become one with a television program and lose yourself in a movie. It happens all the time. We're being absorbed all the time. I mean, this is happening now. Okay? I'm just saying. Absorption is kind of a mode of living. Or you could maybe step back and start paying attention, looking around. Oh, what's going on? You know, where you're at. So we've got attention, absorption. Those are kind of normal flow of everyday life. And then, part of this is like thinking ahead, the future. What am I going to be doing next? Past, where have I been? Past, future, absorption, attention. Past, future, absorption, attention. It becomes a rhythm of everyday, ordinary life. So, awareness. Can we be present to whatever's happening? Can I be present to you now? And can you be present to me? And when we feel presence, we're experiencing what I'm calling awareness, that we're in the moment, being present to each other. If we can enter that state of presence, there's no more separation between any of us. We're all in the soup together. We're all in the soup of consciousness. So awareness is a noticing, a sense that I am here noticing. Meditation is a good example of sitting, noticing whatever's going on. But there's a sense of presence to whatever's going on. Presence. Not self in the usual sense. Like self, Jim Burrell. Not self. We all have a name. No, that's still in the head. That's still based on memory and all kinds of stuff, as the last speaker mentioned. No, this means just simple presence. I'm here. You're here. That's it. That is the objective witness. That's being truly objective. Western science always wanted to have an objective observer, so you dress up in a white lab coat and you pretend like you're an observer. That's not objective observer. Objective observer means being able to be aware impartially to whatever's going on, simply, impartially. I'd like us just to take a few moments and just shut our eyes just for a few moments and get in touch with just noticing whatever's happening in your experience. It could be thoughts. It could be a feeling. It could be a body sensation, a feeling of your feet on the floor. It doesn't matter. Just let's take a few moments to shut our eyes and just notice whatever you're feeling, whatever it is. Thoughts. See if you can relax back into being just a witness. So when we relax into being the witness, any number of things can be happening. Nothing may be happening. You may just have an empty mind. It's fine. Could be blank. Of course, another interesting question is, who's the observer? That takes us to a whole new place, so I'm not talking about that. Okay? We're talking about a science where we get information. Observing and noticing inner experiences. But describing and reporting, we're talking about first-person present tense. And we're really talking about an ability to describe whatever is going on, like in the case of feeling embarrassed, for example. If you feel embarrassed, you feel like that you're being looked at. You're being observed. Embarrassment is the outer view of you, the outer view. When you're angry, total inner view. You're completely wrapped up in your view from your embodied position. But when you feel embarrassed, like that, or feel guilty, you step out of yourself and you view yourself as a third person from the outside. So there's different viewpoints. In experience, there's an inner viewpoint and an outer viewpoint. We flew Air India into Delhi, and it was the first time I experienced that they had cameras at the front of the plane so you could actually see yourself going down the runway. And that was really fascinating because this is the inner viewpoint. Here we are going down the runway. And, a lot of the, we talk about American Airlines and so forth, you're seeing the plane flying as if you're outside from the outer viewpoint. You see, because you can see the plane from the outer flying around, or you can be actually in it and viewing it from the inside viewpoint. So we always have these two viewpoints available to us, the inner and the outer. In the East, the emphasis has been on the inner viewpoint. In the West, it's been on the outer viewpoint. But basically, it's how to merge the inner with the outer. This is an example of driving down the road in traffic and trying to get to work, for example. The light's green, you're approaching the green light, and all of a sudden, the light will change. And this is, you stop and you get frustrated. You're saying, late to work, I need to avoid this. Can I avoid being late to work? And so there could be a certain amount of frustration or anxiety, whatever, in this. And then, again, this is kind of an inner perspective. To me, it's fascinating driving through Agra. Driving through Agra, it's like an amazing experience. Okay? I mean, it's an amazing experience because I'm thinking, these guys, everybody should start their driving training in Agra, But, I mean, seriously, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. I mean, anywhere. I mean, and so the thing that's so interesting is that you could see as you're driving down the road, these people have to have an awareness, a situational awareness around them, or it's all over, right? It's done. So I'm saying this is a good example of having to be alert. Awareness and alert are very closely related. We just most of the time are not alert to what's going on inside of us, you see? That same alertness, driving the road, let's move it inside and see what happens. So if we can move it inside and become alert to those thoughts when they come in, those feelings. Like, I don't think I can handle this. You can let go of that. You can jump on board, and you can feel it and get stressed out. So be alert to whatever's happening in your experience. To understand an experience is to try to understand the common factors of that experience. So in the case of, let's take the case of anxiety, where you're trying to get to work and you're being blocked off, you can start to get the data. Okay, you observe yourself, and you start to get the data, and the data is something like, I don't know if I can make it at work. I can't afford to miss this appointment. A committee is going to be waiting for me. I'm starting to feel I'm sweating, tension in my neck, gripping the steering wheel. Okay, that's really what's happening. Okay, so what you're doing is your first person present tense. What's really happening in the moment. That's your data. That's your basic data. And then when you get a moment of anxiety over here on your job, and a moment of anxiety with your relationship, and a moment of anxiety with your health, then you want to ask the question, what are the common elements across these different kinds of anxiety? What's the common core across these situations? Even though the situation changes, anxiety stays the same. So if I could understand the cause of anxiety, I could know how to let go of anxiety, independent of the situation. Otherwise, we're going to say, oh, I'm anxious because I'm at work, or I'm anxious because of my health, or I'm anxious because of this or that. You see? So we always have an excuse because situations are changing. So we're trying to find the common elements. And an example of the common elements here, every case of anxiety that we have studied. And we've done a lot of research in this area, and we've used psychophysical methodologies, magnitude estimations, visual analog scales most of the time. And what we came up with is that we find out that whenever an individual is anxious, I don't care what part of the planet they're on, okay, there's going to be a desire to avoid something bad happening. There's going to be within us something that we want to avoid happening, something bad. And then secondly, you're going to feel uncertainty. Uncertainty is a key feature of anxiety. You want to avoid something? Hey, I'm not sure I can do it. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. Okay? And then finally, there's going to be associated physical feelings, unpleasant feelings with that. And some people blood pressure will rise, blood pressure will change, all kinds of, you'll sweat, not sweat. It doesn't matter, but the point is there'll be a physiological profile, and often it depends on type. But nevertheless, these three factors, if you eliminate any one of those, I guarantee you there's no anxiety. End of it. End of anxiety. Okay? So once you find the common elements of an experience, you find the causes of that experience, the causes of anxiety. Now, these are vertical causes, not horizontal. They're causes that are embedded in the experience. They're embedded in the experience. But what it gives us is the opportunity to start to take charge of our own lives, take charge of our own mind, mental activity, our relationships, because you can begin to see that by understanding this, you're no longer a victim of life circumstances. Another facet of anxiety, a particular kind of anxiety, would be the kind I would experience right now myself. Okay? This is performance anxiety. Okay? Performance anxiety. You're sort of like, all these eyes, and I'm saying, what starts solving that problem? Well, if I use my eyes to look at you, changes everything. But if I feel like you're looking at me, I get nervous. Yeah, real nervous. Okay, so performance anxiety, for example, part of the data we're talking about, once you're aware, and you start to understand the experience and what's going on, you see things like, am I going to get a response? Wish that we could just sit there and look at me. Won't these people respond to me? And so in performance anxiety, you have a strong need to avoid failure. You believe that the audience is made up of important people. You're all important to me, huh? Okay, you see what I'm saying? So if I make you really important, it would make me more nervous, right? But if I see that we're just all in the soup together of life, there's no problem. There's no problem. We're just here. We're all just here. But part of this need to avoid failure is this belief that there are significant people out there, and you don't want to let them down, and you don't want to look bad. You don't want to be embarrassed. You consider the possibility of failing, so you feel unsure of yourself or whether or not you're going to do well. There's that old uncertainty thing coming in again. You see those elements of anxiety now. The need to avoid something bad, failure in this case, failure. And here you have the uncertainty of doing well. And finally, there's a sense of you're focused on yourself because you see you experience all the eyes on you. So you're sort of like aware of yourself up here, kind of uptight, That's anxiety. Okay, so that's performance anxiety. Now, once you come up with these factors and you have what we call intersubjective agreement, group consensus on essential factors, what you're really trying to say is these factors in the descriptions, you pull the factors from these descriptions, first-person reports, and you pull these factors. Now, some of these factors will be written out. I feel unsure of myself. Now, you could say, well, that's uncertainty, right? I feel unsure of myself. Or I wonder what's going to happen. That's implicit. That's not explicit. That's implicit in the experience. I wonder if it's going to happen. Well, I wonder if it's going to happen. That's uncertainty again, only stated differently, right? So you can state this. The same meaning can have different presentations there, you see? So if you can look at the data implicitly and explicitly, you can weed out those common elements. Weed out those common elements and bring them out. All participants are to reach a consensus on an agreement of these common factors. If we all agree on them, as co-investigators, we can go out and start to test these as hypotheses. We're basically generating hypotheses here. So a couple of hypotheses that would be an example would be, first of all, a desire to avoid a negative consequence, an uncertainty of avoiding them, and associated unpleasant feelings. All these factors here are all necessary and sufficient for anxiety. Necessary and sufficient. Now, you know what I mean by necessary and sufficient? In other words, if all these are there, you're going to have anxiety. So if all the factors, if the desire to avoid the uncertainty and the unpleasant feelings are all there, then you're going to have a feeling of you've discovered the causes of anxiety. Now, each one of those are necessary but not sufficient. So it requires the whole bundle of them. Merging qualitative and quantitative testing hypotheses. Okay, so we've got a situation here where we're interested in taking this data, these elements, and we're trying to find out what is it that we can do with these qualitative statements that are really hypotheses. And one qualitative hypothesis would be that you feel uncertain, and uncertainty is necessary but not sufficient for performance anxiety. That is a qualitative statement. It's not quantitative. It's like, hey, uncertainty is necessary but not sufficient for anxiety. A quantitative hypothesis would be the greater the desire to avoid a negative consequence, the greater the anxiety. So, if you don't have a strong desire to avoid something bad happening, your anxiety can be pretty low level. Pretty low level. The greater your desire, the stronger your anxiety is going to be. The greater your desire. And the lower your desire, you might feel a little bit of excited or whatever, but it's not going to be full-blown anxiety. So the level of desire is an amplifier of your emotions. Your desire is the amplifier of your emotions. Merging qualitative and quantitative testing hypotheses. As we mentioned, psychophysical scaling methods we've used, structural equations. One of the things that we've been paying quite a bit of attention to, particularly Dr. Price, who couldn't make it to the conference, he and I go way back. He was a neurophysiologist, and I was a research psychologist at the University of California, Davis. And he's been involved mainly in neuroimaging, and I've been helping him out a lot with that as an assistant. Let's have a couple of slides, neuroimaging slides. He's been working a lot on pain research, and I've been working with him also with placebo stuff. But this is an example of brain activity that corresponds to common elements in experience. So if you take experiences of pain, you can begin to ask questions like, how does a placebo, and you're all familiar with what a placebo is, it's an agent that's supposed to reduce pain that's really has any kind of active agent at all in it. So it could be a sugar pill. So you have the placebo condition over here and then baseline condition here, and you're looking at the insulocortical areas, and you're also looking at the second somatosensory cortex, which is S2. Now, what you find are these regions are lit up. The brighter they are, the hotter those areas are, okay, as far as neuronal activity and temperature. Basically, it's temperature, measurement of temperature. And so you can see that it corresponds, when you get the placebo effect, when people start to believe that the pain is actually going to be reduced, and most importantly, the suggestion needs to be, it has been known that this agent reduces pain. Really important that the word known gets in there. Because if the word known doesn't get in there, the suggestion is not near as effective. So this agent has been known to reduce pain. And in that instance, you'll find both these areas, somatosensory cortical area 2 and as well as the insulocortical areas, you'll find there's a reduction in the overall activity. And this is the placebo studies. And we found that in the placebo studies, what you can identify as common factors, the really important thing to look at is, again, coming up with desires and expectation. When people are effectively influenced by placebo, they have a desire to avoid the pain drops down because they feel so confident that this agent's going to solve the problem. So their expectations go up and their desire goes down, and you get the placebo effect. So the expectations need to go up. Hey, it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And the desire goes down. It's just, I don't care as much now because I think it's going to happen. So your desire to avoid the pain becomes less. And you get the placebo effect from that. And those common elements are then reflected in the brain slides. Also, studies in hypnosis. Rather fascinating because, again, you get the same kind of effect. When you find the common elements of hypnosis and you look at these particular brain regions, you'll see that the two main areas, the anterior cingulate cortex, and which is up here, and then you've got down here you have somatosensory cortical area 1 there, and you can see again that hypnotic modulation of the pain, again through suggestion, significantly reduces neural activity in these two regions. So there's a correlation between these hypnotic suggestions that are given, and I shouldn't just say suggestions. Remember, the suggestion has to be experienced by the person it's being suggested to, right? The important thing is, how does the person experience the suggestion? And once you understand that person's in a hypnotic state that's deep enough, you'll find that all of a sudden you get this effective change in neural activity, reduction in neural activity. This is an example of the common elements in hypnosis. So, if you were effectively hypnotized, by the way, it happens a lot to us, you know. It could be happening now. I mean, it's like we get a lot of self-hypnosis going on. And it's when you get into that, remember that absorbed state we were talking about? Like, you know, you just sort of, number one, absorb focus on one or few targets. To be hypnotized, once you're hypnotized, you're just totally, your range of attention does this, as opposed to this. Feeling of relaxation, mental ease, no judging, no monitoring, no censoring, suspension of the usual orientation of time and self. Your self becomes totally different. I mean, it's a totally different experience. So there is no concern. The thing that's interesting, if you suggest the person's arm is going to be raising, and their arm starts to go up like this, their experiences, they're not doing it. They're not doing it. The suggestion is being made that your arm is lifting, your arm is raising, and you have the experience that this is almost not your body anymore. You know what I mean? It's all happening. And you can imagine, there are areas in the brain that if you lesion them, a person exhibits automatic behavior and loses touch with being connected to a body. Their body, it's like the body's out there, it's like something separate, like an object. It's doing its own thing. Doing its own thing. Okay, the stages of the experiential method. Just in review. Awareness. Indispensable. And I think that I appreciate so much the Eastern orientation. And the reason why I say that is I can honestly tell you that back in 1970, Dr. Price and I were at the University of California, Davis, and we met a number of people coming over that were yogis that we spent time with. And I had not a clue about this kind of experiencing. It's almost like by following the meditative techniques that these people suggested, it opened up a whole new world for me. And I began to realize, wow, this is what we're missing in the West. This is incredible. This is amazing. And it's like waking up. Where have I been all this time? And suddenly that opened up a lot of other possibilities for us as researchers. We started to bring in phenomenology. Some of the works of Merleau-Ponty, some of the works of Jean-Paul Husserl. We brought some of it because basically these people were talking about how to describe experience. Okay, they were very descriptive, but nevertheless the opening had to do with awareness and had to do with the Eastern orientation, and begin to realize that this was an aspect of our training and our education that was totally missing. It's not there. You can go through and get a PhD in everything in psychology or whatever and never have any sense of understanding yourself, of inside viewpoint, the way you think, the way you feel. It's not there. It's not there. We believe in the West that we want to have high self-esteem. And high self-esteem means you want to build up your name and your ego as much as possible. Okay? And it's like you want to be inflated. And that's fine. But the problem is, of course, is when you start going that route, all the problems we have on the planet, like greed and everything. Greed's a big one, right? And it has to do with we have a sense of ourself being separate from each other. That's a real problem because we're involved in a self-concept. We think of ourselves as nothing but a concept, okay? And your concept, different than my concept, there's a space between us now. But once we get past the self-concept, and we get right here and just feel ourselves now. Once we get past that, then we start to get the sense of like, you know what? It's all connected here. Breathe in the same air, right? Spinning on a planet. All this is all happening. Come from microscopic cell. Miraculous stuff. All of us. Amazing. So these stages of experiential method: observing, noticing, describing the first person present tense. Again, the common factors, what's present in all the instances of the experience. That's how we're going to understand an experience. I don't care what experience you want to understand. Could be anything. Intersubjective agreement, a group consensus on essential factors. Then again, the potential to merge the quantitative with the qualitative, and using definitional hypotheses and functional hypotheses. Definitional simply meaning qualitative, and functional simply meaning quantitative hypotheses. And using psychophysical methods, brain imaging, other scientific methods, any of the methods in the West work fine. We just need to develop hypotheses that have to do with direct experiences that people have. And then we'll start doing some stuff that's relevant on the planet. Stuff, real issues, real problems that we have as human beings with ourselves and with each other. Now, for a deeper understanding of some of these common factors, which are all very familiar, I think, in the East particularly, we're looking at approach and avoidance goals, desires, and expectations. These three factors come up, they come up a lot. They come up a lot. And what's happening with approach and avoidance goals, there's a big difference between if you live your life with approach goals or you live your life with avoidance goals. It makes a huge difference. And we did a lot of research on this. In the next slide, this is an example where this is a desire for a romantic evening. And here's this guy approaching this girl. And on the left side, you see he's anticipating, with an approach goal, wow, I think she's going to accept me and everything's going to go great, That's an approach goal. I want that to happen. Right side, I want to avoid it happening. I want to avoid that happening. So you can see anything has to do with avoidance, has to do with I want to avoid being helpless. The big three fears in human beings, big three: helplessness, loneliness, nothingness. Helplessness, loneliness, nothingness. Helplessness, nothingness could mean that you're a nobody and you're a nothing. You're dead already, but you're alive. Or it could be death. Could be death. But nothingness, helplessness, and loneliness. These are the major avoidance goals to get to the bottom of it. But nevertheless, no matter what you do in life, what are you doing it for? I'm doing it because I want to avoid failure. I'm doing it because I want to be a success. Okay. Success, that's an approach goal. Avoidance goal, I want to avoid failure. Okay. Now, here's, based on a lot of research and a lot of psychophysical ratings that we did, on the x-axis down below there, we have the expectation of getting what you want. See? The expectation of desire. This is like, what's your experience of the chances you're going to get what you want? At the far right, you know for sure you're going to get what you want. Okay? Down here, it's like there's no chance. Zero. You're not going to get what you want. And up here is your feeling here. There's, at the 0 point and above it is how good you feel. At the 0 point and below it is how bad you feel. So how good and how bad do you feel? Now, here's avoidance goals and approach goals, right? With avoidance goals, when you're trying to avoid something bad happening, what these curves show you at two different levels of intensity, what they show you is that you have to start feeling almost certain before you start feeling good. When you make your life things that you want to avoid happening, I want to avoid this and I want to avoid that, you have to almost expect that it's going to happen. Almost get close to certainty before you start feeling good. And when you feel good, guess what? You feel relief. It's relief. On the right side, approach goals is that you are focused on what you want to happen. And when you're excited about something, you say, wow, I can't wait to do this. I can't wait to do it. See what happens is at the very low levels of expectation, you start feeling good very early. With approach goals, you start feeling good very, very early. So your life is fuller, a lot more happiness in your life. A lot more happiness in your life when you are using approach goals. Because you're not setting yourself up. With approach goals, start feeling better at very low expectations. It's not that it couldn't switch to this, though. You know what I mean? They can switch back and forth. But just noticing it, I want this. Why do you want it? Well, I want it because, I don't know, I don't think I can go on unless I get this because this will make my life worthwhile. It'll give me meaning. Okay. That sounds great. But now what's behind that? Is there something else behind that? Like, hey, if I don't get this, then my life is meaningless. Oh, that's an avoidance goal, right? So you have to be very careful when you observe yourself and you notice your experiences. You have to notice in depth. We're saying like there's these deep roots of what's going on in our experience, and avoidance goals and approach goals are just part of the machinery. Remember, this is all just part of the machinery. The ordinary life. This is the way ordinary life runs off. But we're involved in ordinary life. So if we can just start noticing ordinary life, you can start to go to extraordinary life. It's pretty hard to push ordinary life out completely because it kind of tends to come back in again. So what I'm suggesting is to understand ordinary life, is to start to free yourself from ordinary life. Let me run all of us through a certain set of emotions and just check it out for yourself and see what you can find. But I want us all to, again, just take a few moments to shut our eyes and imagine something you really want. I mean, try to get in touch with something that you really want that you don't have. Just something you really, really want that you don't have. Okay? It could be anything. See, it doesn't matter what your goal is here. The goal doesn't matter, the type of goal. All that matters is to imagine something you really desire. Desire is what matters here. Okay. So let's take a few moments and think of something you really, really want. Now tell yourself, there's no way you'll ever be able to get it. Ever. But keep your desire. Keep your desire. Don't let your desire go, you know. I mean, you have a freedom there. So if you expect that, you say, I really want this, no way I'll get it. Oh, therefore I don't want it anymore. Okay. No, I'm saying, no, keep the want. Keep the want. Keep the desire, and have the expectation that you'll never get it. Never. Put that desire and that expectation together. D plus E. Desire plus expectation equals depression, despair, depending on how strong your desire is, right? Your desire is too high, then you won't be feeling that bad. But if you really, really want it, and you tell yourself you're never going to get it, and you keep wanting it, you know what's going to happen. So you've got depression. Well, how about if your expectation changed from way down here to 0, and it brought it up a little bit? Oh, I'm not sure. I don't think I'll get it, but, you know, it's possible. So you start feeling like maybe a little frustrated, and then up here you get uncertainty. Maybe I will get it. Maybe I won't get it. Maybe I will get it. Maybe I won't get it. That's anxiety. That's anxiety. And then you get up a little bit higher up here and you say, I think I'm going to get what I want. Guess what that is? Excitement. Excitement. So you move that expectation up to here. Now you get excitement. Then finally, you move it to the top and say, hey, I know I'm going to get this. This is great. And you get fulfilled. You get fulfilled, and you feel satisfied because you've fulfilled your desire. So if you understand desire and expectation, those two big ones, you understand all your emotions and how they work. You can understand the mechanics of all your emotions and all your feelings. We have marvels of this right now. And it's in our book called Inner Experience in Neuroscience at MIT. Press is published. But the details are all in there. But I'm just saying, you can verify this all for yourselves. You know, this is not some kind of a theory I'm throwing out there to you. I'm saying, check it out, you know? Check it out. See if it makes sense to you. Or don't check it out. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to do. But I'm just saying, you can find out if you want to. If you want to. See, once you find out this kind of information, you can't be a victim anymore. No more. You can't say, oh, it's because of this situation, because of this person. That's why I'm angry. That's why I'm depressed. That's why I'm anxious. It's because I'm in this situation. You start to realize it all has to do with your reactions. And your reactions are only available when you are aware. Only available when you're aware. So, this integration of experiential and traditional methodologies, really, it's the same problem and the same issue of what we talk. It's a hard problem in consciousness research. The hard problem in consciousness research is the relationship of the mind and the brain, or the mind and the body, right? And we can start to become more and more sensitive. From an outer viewpoint, we can start to increase our sensitivity to the point that we can actually reach quantum levels of understanding. But we're still doing this from the outer viewpoint. I'm just trying to say nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying anything wrong with it. I'm just saying, as long as we understand, we're not in the inner viewpoint yet. We can become more and more sensitive as we understand matter at different levels. But we're still outside looking at matter from an outer viewpoint. Inner viewpoint is when you are able to deepen your awareness within yourself, and particularly yourself and who you are, and back in as a witness and notice all the information that's available. Now it's a whole different thing. I've always said, like you look at Western science, and this is no criticism of Western science because beautiful things are being done in Western science. I've been involved with that for a long, long time. And so I really do appreciate it. But if you notice, as we go out, what happens is the complexity of things start to increase. And so almost we deepen the mystery of things. Multiple universes. I'm just saying, it gets to be so incredible, and you could say, hey, there's a real aesthetic to this. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. And so you're opening up with science more and more of this information going out. But if you want to know what is, if you want to find out something about what really is, you have to go this way. Go this way. And so you ask the question, who am I? That's the fundamental question. It's the fundamental question. There is no other fundamental question. Without that answer, everything else is like, what are we doing? A lot of fantasies going on. A lot of imagination going on. So until we understand that basic question, who am I? Who am I at the core? So this is a question not necessarily for practical research, but a very important question in our lives. But as you do the research, you'll start to feel more and more that becomes available to you. As you do the experiential research, what becomes available to you is an increasing awareness of who you really are. Because you're not identified anymore with what's out there as your name, your history, your personal history. Nothing wrong with your personal history. Nothing wrong with your name. It's just that it kind of comes and goes. You get a blow in the head and you forget who you are. It comes and goes. The self comes and goes. But when you go inward and you get that sense of presence and the sense of that being solid in you, and people call that realization. That's not knowing who you are. It's realizing who you are. It's not a knowing. Any kind of a knowing means it puts it out here separate from you. To know something is to separate you from the knowing. But a realization is you live it, you are it, and there's no question anymore. It's over. It's over. So the mystery, instead of opening more and more, goes the other direction. Oh. What's going on? Final thing I'd like to speak to is two concepts in the East that's very important: identification and attachment. And I've been saying a lot of things today about common elements, and at the base of all these common elements that you discover are these two things, levels of desire and expectation, and understanding those concepts. Now, interesting enough, if you think about desire, it correlates very well with identification. The more you want something, the more you become identified with it. Does that make sense? The more you want something, the more you become identified with it, and almost it becomes part of you because the want is so strong. But attachment's different. Attachment is your expectation that you can hang on to it, that you can keep it. So the problem with expectation and attachment is letting go. So it isn't just desire. Desire is the trap. Desire is not the only trap. Expectation is also a trap. Desire and expectation are traps. When it comes to wanting to evolve consciously and to free ourselves from the mechanical life that we live most of the time. We're studying ordinary life. Nothing wrong with that. But by studying ordinary life, you stop being identified as much with it. You start seeing it from a perspective. You're not caught up in it anymore. It's interesting. Fascinating stuff. Great movie. Great movie. So the integration of the science of human experience with the rest of science would provide an understanding that's both deeply personal and also widely public. And could also provide a basis for making decisions most wisely. So much of our problems on the planet is making the right kind of choices. And where are these choices coming from? Are they coming from a sincere place of being in touch with really who you are, your understanding of yourself? Is it a wisdom kind of choice that you're making? Or does it have to do with, I'll use the word ego, the word's thrown around all the time, but ego, or is it just self-centered? And I'm just saying, to be aware of your choices and how you make your choices, to be aware of that starts to give you a perspective of how to improve that decision-making property. Overall, the science of human experience is based on the cultivation of awareness, the bottom line. This will provide a path to the elevation of being and knowledge, which I think is really needed on this planet for all of us. So it's something we put together over 35, 40 years, working on a perspective that was opened up by people from the East that really came and gave us the insight, which I can only say I very deeply, deeply appreciate. That's it.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I have a couple of points. First of all, here you speak of human experience as providing this template for a deeper understanding. My wife and I and our children have lived with a cockatiel for 20 years. And as you were presenting your slides, I noticed, rehearsing in my mind, that almost all of that also applied to the bird. And perhaps one could also learn from the personalities and experience of animals. Now, that's one point. The second point is, in what you spoke of as the basic elements of realization, I thought, looking at someone who is familiar with the East, that there was one element which was missing, which is what is commonly called the element of sacrifice. When it comes to realization, the idea of ceasing to be who you were, which in sacrifice, in a metaphorical sense, means to kill who one was prior, and then to slip into a new being, so to speak. And possibly that is a fundamental element of self-study, which is, of course, what is something that you were arguing for here.
Yes. The first, in regard to your first comment about animals, and I had a dog, and again, one of the problems, of course, is that with an experiential method, the only experience that you and I have access to is our own, directly. That's one of the problems, and that's why Western science has kind of said, hey, you can't deal with this stuff. But you can, because you can examine your private experience, I can examine mine, and we can share, right? Okay, so an animal is a little more difficult, I'm just saying. And so with our dog, I'm just watching our dog, and I'm saying, the dog is like his tail. The tail is a big deal. Okay? And that dog, when that dog was feeling good, that tail was up like this, right? And when that dog was down, depressed, the tail was down like this. And when that dog was anxious, it was like this, the tail. And that dog felt excited, it was raised a little bit like this, excited. And in frustration, trying to get a hold of a ball with his teeth in the backyard, and his tail was doing this. I thought, you could do a sensitive behavioral analysis of the animal, but you're still stuck with the problem of having to be able to empathize. But you do know that again, by being aware of ourselves, we can become aware of the consciousness in everything. You know what I mean? That this is not just a human phenomenon. But I'm just saying the understanding and the communication is a problem. And as far as service, I think that's very important. And I think it's important that once you can start to change your sense of who you are, and you start to realize that you're part of everything and everybody else. When you have that loss of boundaries in the typical sense, it's easy to be of service because what I do for you, I do for me too. I mean, it's not like I'm sacrificing. I'm not sacrificing anything because I'm it, and you are it too. So we're all it. I'm just saying. So there's no sacrifice to it. Now, there is a sacrifice to it earlier on. Don't get me wrong. Earlier on, you probably have to make some sacrifices because the ego has to weaken itself to the point where it can surrender. That make sense?
I do see that point, but perhaps what I was really trying to put across is this idea that a lot of the inner experience is eventually paradoxical. And sacrifice, the concept of sacrifice is paradoxical. Because how can you want not to be who you are? Because that is something terrible, because you were talking of nothingness. Certainly, that is something to be avoided. But paradoxically, in order to live, you have to die. Do you see that? So that's that sacrifice that I was alluding to.
Exactly.
And therefore, we do have to come face to face with many different polarities which embrace within themselves opposites of different kinds.
That's right.
And that is very fundamental to inner experience.
I agree.
Thank you.